Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This video is going to go over a brief overview of Space Marine 2 and what I liked about it as a game, what I liked about it for its lore, and also what I think it could improve on, as well as what I would hope for another game in the future, assuming that this game is getting the success that it should, which it does seem to be at this point to make it financially successful. And as always, if you have been a supporter for the last few months and subscribed, I appreciate it. For the last few years, really appreciate it. If you're just new here, welcome, and I hope you subscribe if you like this content. And there's plenty of lore content on this channel. If you happen to stumble upon us here, there's plenty on almost any subject you can imagine, and there will be plenty more in the future here. So to kind of start this off, as a game, I think that Space Marine 2 is serviceable. It is a very fun, kind of clunky in a good way, chunky, hack and slash, destroy all the enemies on the screen type of game. The weapons feel as you would hope that they feel, especially if you're playing on a controller, on the console or on PC with a controller. The feedback you get through the controller feels great. I heard it feels really good on a PS5 controller with the haptic feedback triggers there. I almost want to get a PS5 controller just to test that out myself now. And the weapon selection, while not the greatest, what is there is pretty fun to use, and the weapons are varied enough to feel different enough to want to use each of them and kind of figure out how they work. It's basically an assortment of different bolter types that range from closer range to longer range, like some sniping variants, and then you got some specialized weapons like plasma weaponry, melta guns, and a couple of specialized melee weapons like the power sword and thunder hammer. And I didn't really come across a weapon that I really didn't like to use. When I was playing it, I played mostly with some other people in the 3-player co-op, and someone else handled like the flamethrower that you need for specific segments of the game. I never used it, but I heard it wasn't that good. And I was watching Asmongold play it a little bit, and he definitely wasn't using that weapon. It wasn't doing much at all, so they either need to boost the damage of the flamethrower, or it was just meant for a very specific segment, and it's never seen in the game again, so there was that kind of odd thing there. And as far as gameplay and stability-wise, it definitely needs some work. There are a couple parts of the game where you have like a certain type of weapon loadout, and then you load into a new area, and for some reason the game takes away that weapon loadout and gives you something completely different that's not as good. Like at one point I had a power sword, and the power sword is better than a chain sword, at least it should be, and it feels that way, at least when I was using it. But then when loading into a particular area, suddenly I had a chain sword, and I had a different primary weapon too, instead of the bolter I had chosen. So there's those kind of weird things that I think over time they will be able to fix. I think they're just weird things left in the game or that got through QA on it. But there is not enough issues with the game by far to make it a unenjoyable experience. I did have some internet stability issues with it, and that does throw you back to the home screen if you do lose connection with your friends, which is a little bit frustrating. But again, it only happened a few times in the 12 to 15 hours that I played the campaign. But when it did occur, it was a pretty bizarre situation. My stream was still going on the live stream, but the game was disconnected from the internet, and it seemed like I lost connection with the internet, but I didn't because the live stream never went down. It was one of the most bizarre situations I've ever seen with live streaming and like online gaming in general. But again, that only happened like one time. So overall, I think that the gameplay has like this very good, gritty, clunky, fun gameplay loop of, like taking down target enemies with like cool execution attacks, and then you have really cool crowd control weapons like the multi-melta and other melta and plasma weapons, and the grenades, give a appreciable explosion and destroy, huge swaths of the enemy, which with the Tyranids being the main enemy, you definitely get to just, go through waves and waves of them, and it's a lot of fun to do that. I found facing the Thousand Suns, which is the secondary enemy in the game, a bit less interesting in terms of combat, but as far as lore-wise, it was pretty cool. But I do think that that faction is a little less interesting to fight from a gameplay perspective versus the Tyranids. The Tyranids have a bit more of a variance to their enemy types they can throw at you. Not by much, but they do, compared to the Thousand Suns. And then I did play a bit of the PvP in the game, and I think that that is going to be fun. It was a bit hard to tell. I only played a few rounds of it, and the gameplay is definitely a bit more slower paced than a lot of multiplayer shooters these days. And I think some people will like that as a difference compared to like the super knee-jerk, spin around 1,000 times stuff we're seeing from like the new Black Ops Call of Duty game, where it seems like super twitch, MLG Pro, sweaty boy reflexes are the name of the game, whereas in this it's much more about positioning and kind of trying to get the drop on enemies from flanking positions, or if you have a squad, making sure each of you are working your classes in the right way and trying to coordinate how best to close with the enemy and deal with them. It's a bit different with just randoms online, though. Things can kind of end up coming down to who is going to kill who more, at least in the Annihilation mode, which I played, where it's just basically team deathmatch, essentially. Now, shifting into the lore side of things, this game is an absolute masterpiece on its dedication to the lore of the universe in terms of art direction, first and foremost. Every single part of this game has some kind of iconography for the Emperor, for the Imperium, or when you're in Mechanicus areas, you know that by their symbol being everywhere. The different characters all are immaculate in the what faction they depict. You're never going to confuse a Space Marine for a Cadian Imperial Guardsman, and you're never going to mistake a Guardsman or Space Marine for a member of the Adeptus Mechanicus or anything in between. They're all very much rendered lovingly and crafted to look exactly like they do both on tabletop and in artwork. And for me, as a lore YouTuber now at this point, with almost 2,000 of you listening, I have to say that if you're like me and you love the lore, you will love this game. And I don't mean like it, I mean love it. Because while it's not the best game ever to come out in terms of gameplay, as far as art direction goes and moments in it, it feels really like some of the stories I've read about in the novels over the last 20 years finally coming to life in one of the best ways possible. And it's something I can show, my friends and family that are somewhat interested in Warhammer, a reason why I like it so much and why I like the book so much. It's hard to convey, a scene you see in your head from a book to somebody and say, this is why I like a thing. Versus you can show them a video of a climactic, insane moment, a clip of what you saw in the game, and them going, wow, that's pretty cool. And it's like, yes, it is. You should play it. It's pretty awesome. A game like this should be respected for the amount of work that went into this, because the game is not phoned in at all in terms of, trying to convey the Warhammer 40k universe. It absolutely, drips with the universe's atmosphere, and the characters' attitudes convey that. It just is completely and utterly unapologetic in how it conveys the universe. Just like the Imperium is very unapologetic about its existence. That all comes across just insanely well. And I don't really want to get into spoilers here for you guys, but I can just encourage you to please, go support this game based on this alone. I think that if this game is financially successful, then a third entry, a Space Marine 3, will be even better. I really think so. As long as this company stays in charge and is allowed to continue down the path that they were able to go with this game, no one seemed to meddle with this game at all. On a story standpoint, there was a bit of concern about that early on in development, that one of the writers might try to self-insert themselves into the game or something like that, but there was no sign of that. Everything in the game very much felt like, it was Warhammer authentic and specific, so you can tell that Games Workshop was definitely making sure that was the case. But you can also tell that the artists and writers of the game truly understood the universe as well and were fans of it. If I could level a criticism at the story or lore of the game, it's just that it's a bit short for me as a lore person. I would like to see more. I would like to see more varied places that we go or see. One of the things that often happens in Warhammer games, and maybe this is just a direction by Games Workshop, is that often we are stuck in an imperial landscape. This game did have a bit of, out in like a swamp type biome, which was nice, but it was kind of generic. There wasn't super anything stand out about it. It was just very swampy. It was fine. It was serviceable. And then we end up going to some very imperial, industrial, and imperial architecture type of places, which again is fine. And the scale of the architecture just shows how imposing the Imperium can be. It conveys the age of the Imperium, the amount of work that goes into one world to, build monuments to the hubris of humanity, I guess, and to the Emperor and what that all means. All of that comes across super well. But that being said, 40K has within its, setting many very different biomes that it could be set in that might be a bit less, stereotypical for the setting to be. I don't think every single place that we go to in a Warhammer game needs to be this super high Gothic architecture imperial location. I would like to see us go to, I guess, just more varied biome type of places that are spoken of in the lore sometimes. There's like a planet in Eisenhorn that has like a bunch of these really like inflated, like basically these plants that move around on giant inflated like balloon type parts of the plant, and they move around with the wind currents, and it just looks like almost like, I guess, groups of like migrating tumbleweeds, but with like an air bladder, so to speak. And just the idea of like a planet with that kind of weird look to it would just be so unique and stand out. And nothing really stood out here environmentally to me, other than the architecture at times, which was grandiose and beautiful in its own way, but just was kind of standard by this point in a Warhammer game. Going as far back as like the Dawn of War games, like Dawn of War 2 had a lot of this architecture, and that game came out back at 16 years ago now. I remember getting that game at Best Buy, driving to go get it, not far from where I live now, back when I was 18 years old, getting it from the PC aisle there, and that game had a very similar architecture style to this game in a lot of ways, because again, the Imperium proper is very templated. They kind of build everything very similar wherever they go, and that's fine, that's lore accurate, but that's not all that is lore accurate about this universe, and they could vary that a bit more in a third game. And then I thought that the story itself was good and serviceable, and I love seeing the Thousand Suns in a game, but I do think that they could have done a bit more depth with the story. One thing that I brought up to some people was, like, if you look at like the Dark Souls games or Elden Ring or any of those games are steeped in lore. If you want to find lore and you want to delve into the depths of that, there's plenty of that to be had in those games. But if you simply want to walk through that game and just fight all the bosses and be done with it, you can do that too. But they didn't decide to skimp on the lore just because some people would choose that. And I feel like with this game, they could add a lot more lore to it than they did. They did add a fair bit of it. And a lot of the storytelling is environmental, like Dark Souls to me. But I think they could go a bit deeper, and they could do a bit more with it for those of us that would love to be able to delve into more mystery. Maybe they inject into the story, or just things that are unresolved so that we can talk about it more. And there is some of that here, and I will kind of dive into spoilers right here. So if you have not played the game and don't want to be spoiled, then skip past this, and I'll put a timestamp note for when spoilers end after this for you. So essentially, for the plot, we have Titus from the first game, demoted from captain to lieutenant now, coming back from serving the Death Watch for 100 years, back into the Ultramarines. And it's basically a direct continuation of the story from the first one in terms of The same relic that Titus dealt with in the first game is being used in the second one by the Mechanicus to try to shut off connections with the warp. They were experimenting with it in that way. And they were using this object in conjunction with Necron technology. Underneath one of the worlds in this game is a Necron tomb world, apparently. But it's inert. Throughout the game, no Necrons wake up, so we don't fight any Necrons at all. That might be a hint for our third game, if we ever get to it, that Necrons might be another faction we fight coming up. And certainly within like Warhammer Plus and places, Necrons have been a main enemy and have been stepping more to the forefront of content over time as both an enemy, protagonist, antagonist, all of the above. And one of the more interesting tidbits of the lore that they put into this is somehow this artifact was being used by Chaos and the Thousand Suns to amplify warp power for a time through Necron technology, which is odd considering Necron technology has nothing to do with the warp at all. The thing about the Necrons and their lords, the Catan, is they are completely physical beings. They don't have souls. They don't have a presence in the warp. And for the Catan specifically, the warp as a concept makes absolutely no sense to them. They can't comprehend it because they are not part of it in any way, shape, or form. Humans have some kind of connection to it and understand it to that degree. But we still call it a place of unreality, a place that can't be comprehended by the human mind. Only certain, mutant strains of humanity, like navigators, can comprehend any of it, and then psychers a little bit more so, but they're more using the power of the warp than really understanding it, and it's still very dangerous for them. And so it was an interesting twist to see Necron tech being used in a way to amplify warp technology. But then through essentially switching the polarity almost of a Necron piece of technology, it turned back into from a purple color to the traditional Necron green color, and started diminishing the power of the connection to the warp that the forces of the Thousand Suns were enjoying, and then it was just working as intended to basically shut down the warp. But it was just a bit weird to see it being used in reverse. I don't ever recall seeing Necron technology being able to amplify warp technology, so that was a bit interesting. But that was about the deepest it goes. Other than that, it was a pretty standard plot of, a Tyranid splinter fleet, attacking this world. The Thousand Suns using it as cover to do their thing. And while their main enemy, sorcerer that we fight, Imura, is a pretty cool character, overall, I feel like, again, I feel like the fight against them was a little bit phoned in at times. And this is the faction that could be the most deceptive as well. And we get a little bit of that, but really it kind of came across a little bit mustache twirling somewhat. And the Thousand Suns, out of any of the Chaos Forces, they're certainly nefarious, but they're nefarious in a knowledge-seeking way still, more so than just villainous. Mustache twirling is more meant for the Word Bearers Legion, I feel like. And I feel like they made Imura a little bit too, kind of maniacal, I guess, in my opinion at least. He was still cool as a villain, don't get me wrong. And the end sequence of this game, fighting him as kind of an emboss, and the Lord of Change that they have in the game was lovingly built by the artists and looks amazing. So I'm not taking away from the spectacle of it. I'm just thinking that they could have made the game a bit deeper in terms of the plot that we uncover the Thousand Suns meddling in. There is the first Grey Knights book ever written was following the Grey Knights trying to hunt down where a demon prince named Gargatulath, who is a Zench demon prince, where that prince was going to come back from being banished next. And that entire book was basically almost like a mystery type of novel. The Grey Knights are investigating on different worlds, different, breadcrumbs that lead to a specific world eventually where they think that the demon prince is coming back from. And then it all turns out that the demon prince was manipulating them that entire time to get them there because they were needed as part of the ritual to bring him back into the world. And I feel like for a third game, if they wanted to add almost like a Knights of the Old Republic type of travel system where you're traveling to different worlds and zones to try to undercover a plot, that'd be a lot of fun. You could still have a lot of the same gameplay in this game that was there, but you could give the players a bit more control over exploration and things like that, almost like they did with the Rogue Trader game that came out, where you do kind of get to explore different places and see different things and delve a bit deeper into things. I would like to see that in this game, because Space Marines are not the most in-depth characters at times, but that being said, this story we do have between Titus and his squad mates in this game was serviceable, but they could have gone a bit farther with it if they wanted to. They could have had a bit more dialogue between them. I kept reflecting on while I was playing, just the different conversations Space Marines have in the novels with each other. And things do get a bit deeper than, they seem to want to do in the game. And I think they were afraid maybe of turning people off with the lore. But again, I think with the option to skip or not deal with it if you don't want to as an option, you could still leave that there for the rest of us that really love Warhammer for that. Warhammer has a surprisingly rich and deep lore to it. That's what's kept doing for 20 years, is the novels and the mysteries and stories within them. Some of it is very simple and shallow, but it doesn't have to constantly lean into that. These games could have more in them. It'd be cool to see a game where we're a Space Marine, but we're like a librarian, which is a type of psyker that Space Marines have. It's basically the type of psyker that Space Marines are allowed to have. And librarians are not just psychers, but they're also the knowledge house of a chapter a lot of times, and they're the ones doing any amount of research on enemies or having access to the library, which is why they're called a librarian to begin with. Any kind of repository of knowledge that the chapter keeps. They might keep the chapter secrets and forbidden knowledge there, and it'd be fun to be in that role to have to try to travel around and figure out a mystery that the chapter is trying to solve about its past. Imagine being a Blood Raven's librarian and having to try to figure out more about the Blood Raven's past, since that's what they're kind of obsessed with, since they don't even know their own past. It would be a lot of fun to do that, and you can have the Blood Ravens digging into their past, and they stumble upon the Alpha Legion who's messing with their past, and things get weird, and there's a lot of potential to things that they have never tapped into much for Warhammer games. And I understand why, because they want to lean into the combat aspect of it, because at the end of the day, Warhammer is a excuse for different armies to fight each other and be pretty epic. What I'm saying is we can still have the epicness and depth at the same time. It's not like one thing has to be sacrificed for another. I do think you could marry them amicably. Again, if we look at something like Dark Souls or Elden Ring, those games are suitably epic games. And they can be over the top and bombastic, but they also have a soul and depth to them that people appreciate. And those of us that want to go watch VOD videos on the lore can do so. And it doesn't harm anyone else who is just there with their friends and wants to get through the game and then never touch it again and never, watch a single video on the lore. Both are totally valid. One doesn't have to be sacrificed for the other at all. Overall, though, I give the story, a pretty good review. I think it was serviceable, and Titus is a decent character. I think it would be fun to hear more of what he has to say on things. He's a little bit brusque and a bit quiet, and I think part of that's just where he's at in his story. But I think the third game, so we'll kind of roll into the third game now and what I would hope from that. And so in the third game, we would obviously be following Titus still, I think. And in that third game, I would love to see Robot Goleman show up. He was mentioned in this game. It would be cool to see a Primarch in this game. It would be cool to see, like his size disparity against a Space Marine. For those of you who've not seen a Primarch next to a Space Marine, it would give you the idea of just how much different a Primarch is. And it'd be really fun if we get at least a segment of that game where we get to see Robout fight, or the Lion from the Dark Angels, who's their Primarch fight, or we get to fight as one of them for like a flashback sequence or something to convey the power of a Primarch over a Space Marine. It is said that the difference between strengths between a regular human and a Space Marine is the same disparity between a Space Marine and a Primarch. And I would love to see that put to the test in a game. I don't know if they could really do it justice, but I would like to see them try. I would like to see them try and fail than not try at all, is my attitude on it. And so in the third game, I would like to see that. As an enemy, I don't know who we would face off against unless we want to like if Titus is going to go see the Primarch next with the Chapter Master, with Marneus Calgar, which I think is going to happen because at the end of this game, that's what happens. Titus gets to go with Marneus, and assumedly they're going to go to where the Primarch is and help him. My guess is if this is taking place after the Dark Imperium novels, then it's going to be some kind of new threat and extend the story forward from where it was left off with Robout Guilliman dealing with the forces of Nurgle in Ultramar and go beyond that, perhaps to a Necron threat. And perhaps the Necrons will be the main threat in the next game, which would be a first for, this type of combat type game to have the Necrons be an enemy. They'd be fun. They're aesthetically great, but I think them alone might be boring. I do think it was a good idea in this game to have multiple enemy types, and they did that in the first one too, with orcs and then also chaos there. So I think if they keep doing that, because one of the things that 40k is great about is a variety of enemies to fight and interactions between factions, and I want them to continue that for sure. So it would be great if we have like the orcs come back. A lot of people kind of want them to come back, have the Necrons, and then maybe like the Black Legion from Chaos show up or something. It'd be a lot of fun to see the Word Bearers show up, or the Emperor's Children, though. So far we've had Nurgle, we've had Zench, and we've had Khorne show up in a lot of stuff. And Slaanesh has kind of been left out, and I think it's because Slaanesh is a little bit harder to do without going a bit too weird with them at times. But it'd be a lot of fun to go up against a Emperor's Children warband or Fulgrim's forces, like Fulgrim coming back maybe as part of it, and we get to see Robout and Fulgrim have a rematch or something in an actual game. Would be kind of crazy to see. Maybe that's a bridge too far, but there are rumblings of Fulgrim's being around again and helping to even kind of reunite the Emperor's Children Legion a little bit. Get the disparate warbands back together. And it would be kind of fun to have to deal with them in a game and see their crazy insanity on display. Fight off Sound Marines and just the craziness that the Emperor's Children are. Would be a lot of fun. It'd be fun to fight against the Word Bearers too, and Lorgar. And imagine if we got to see Erebus in a game. Wow, that would be crazy to see Erebus in a game. We'd all want to take him down. I doubt they'd give us that privilege in a game, but that would be a monumental moment to see that character put into a game and given a voice actor and get to see him moving around. And it kind of felt that way for me with Marneus Calgar a little bit, because the first time I ever saw anything spoken by him was over 20 years ago, and it's really cool to see artwork come to life, and rendered in a respectful and accurate way. And so if we get a third one, I want to see that continue. I want to see the faithful recreation of this universe pushed to its limits a bit. I want to see the third game lean more grandiosely into just Warhammer. I want to see one or both of the current living Primarchs on the Loyalist side show up. I want to see a Chaos Primarch in this. I want it to just go completely insane, like Warhammer can be insane. We got a taste of that in this game, but it could go further. And if they make back the money and the profit they need to continue this, then Saber, I want you guys just take your gloves off and go for it in this third one. I want you to just knock it out for us, because this universe deserves the kind of care and love that this game obviously got. It could be polished a bit better, but anything can be a bit better and made a bit better with endless tweaking. And I understand there's a point where you just got to kind of call it good enough and get it out there, or it'll never come out. So with all that being said, that's kind of just all I want to say on this. The game is great. I recommend giving your support to it, and I hope to see you on the PvP side of things. I'll be playing it a fair bit, both on live stream and on my own, and I'm sure I'll be live streaming the game a bit more. Maybe I'll go through the campaign again, just myself, without my friends, just to go through the campaign again. It'd be fun to do it at least one more time, I feel like, for me at least, and hang out with some of you on live stream. So, as always, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you're new, I hope that you subscribe. It'd be great to have you in the long term for this channel's growth. And if you've been here for a while, I appreciate you, and I thank you so much for making this channel a reality. It's really cool to see that happen. And I will see you guys in the next video and live stream. Hope you have a great day or night wherever you are. Leave a comment if you want to talk more about this. Talk to you soon.